Manifest freedom, freeing ourselves from the herd or the flock. I believe that freedom is much like happiness that I spoke about earlier. We have a lot of freedom, but you have to be aware of it and you have to use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. There are two gentlemen, Du Bois and Freud, who have in their writings shared their amazing and uncanny ability to truly see human behaviors, human behavior patterns. They're able to recognize the characteristics of different societies and civilizations and empires down through the ages. I'm not particularly a student of either one of these gentlemen, but in what I'm going to speak about today, I think it's very affirming that they agree. There are two types of societies down through history: sustainable and unsustainable. And the sustainable societies were most often indigenous folks, but not always. But some of the characteristics of a sustainable society is the fact that the society is run and managed and has an intention of what is good for the entire society, the good of the whole. And they also embrace personal development, embrace a person's passions and talents and desires. Because when those are embraced and developed, that makes a much stronger fabric in the overall good of the whole of the society. They have the concept or the philosophy that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The unsustainable societies are based a lot on a class system. They're based on keeping the majority of the society sheep-like. Bruce gave a mini message one time that most theologies and religions are based on obedience and compliance. And these unsustainable societies, they group people together in herds or flocks, and they mandate they must comply. They really don't want people to think much. They just want them to obey. And when people start to balk at that a little bit, first thing they use is force and violence to stay in power and control. Most of the sustainable societies throughout history have come to an end because the unsustainable societies destroyed them to expand their territory, get more power, get more money. The key to this thing we call freedom is our own personal thought. Every one of us in this room has been conditioned to be a sheep-like person. I'll give you an example of me. I'll use me as an example. I've always had the gift of being able to handle numbers in my head. Just seems like I always had it. Well, 10 years ago, I knew 80% of all the phone numbers of everybody in this congregation. I knew all of the phone numbers of my customers. I knew all of the phone numbers of my friends. I remembered phone numbers from when I was a little kid. We used to send the newsletter out, mail it out every month. I printed out the labels, the address labels. I knew in my head at least 80% of the addresses. And I could still recite a bunch of them today. Right this minute, there's still some phone numbers that I know. But my grandchildren beat me into submission, and I started putting numbers in my phone. I told my brain it was okay not to process that information anymore. How often do we tell our brains we don't have to process that information anymore? We have so little of our brains that we actually use. And we want freedom, we want to know more. Well, if we don't allow our minds to expand and create and demand that our brains process more and more and think more and remember more, that growth isn't going to happen. Let me ask you a question. What have you created lately, this last week? A new habit, a new friend, a new experience? Have you just gotten in the car and gone someplace you've never gone? What have you created new in your life this last week? Or have we just gone down the same road? We don't have to think about it. We just let the subconscious and the memories and the habits just take us down the same old road, talk to the same people, have the same conversation over and over again. That's not freedom. That's kind of herd-like activity. Our minds, that controls our lives. And as we expand what we do with our minds, it's not long before we understand and become aware of that this individual little mind that I have is actually part of divine mind. And if I can use the combination or the sum total of everything that I'm able to grasp and train my brain to process more information, to expand its capacities, if I can train my brain to retain information and create habits in my day-to-day life that are based on the good of the whole, based on personal developments, based on exercising my creativity, being able to think more than just what I'm told to think over the television. We all have so many of those new things, apps, and the smartphones and the computers and all that stuff. Does that help you think more? It makes more information available, but we don't store it. We don't use our brains to expand. We don't use our minds to expand. We just use that stuff because somebody else is taking care of it. We relinquish our freedom of thought. We relinquish our freedom of figuring stuff out for ourselves. Our own ability to discern and think things through. Is that good for me? Is that good for our society? Or is that just what they want me to buy? Because I'll be happy then. Our society is suffering from a disease. I heard this the other day, and I think it's profound. We have the disease of despair in our society. Because our society, as it stands right now, doesn't look very sustainable. And this disease of despair is almost always, if not always, fatal to a society. And we have, each one of us has within our power the ability to expel that disease from within us. We kick the stuff out of the hallway, and we start thinking, and we start considering, and we tap into that divine mind that we talk about. We're all aware that it's there, but how many times do we tap into it? When we concentrate our thoughts and our creativity on the good of the whole, on gratitude, on sharing, disparity vanishes. And our society, I promise you, is going to need some disparity taken away and vanished. And we have the capacity to do that, first with ourselves and then with the people that are around us. And what is that? That's consciousness. When we elevate our consciousness from disparity to abundance, from disparity to healing, from disparity to forgiveness and compassion, it spreads. And each one of us sitting in this room today has the wherewithal to create a different, better, more loving, more considerate world. But we can't do that if our thoughts are enslaved to debt, or enslaved to obligation, or enslaved to disparity. Freedom, it comes from within. And there's just as much as you want, but you have to want it. And you have to create it for yourself. You have to manifest it within your life. In a moment, we're going to sing Imagine. That deals, the lyrics in that song deal with almost every facet of our life experience. It mentions all of the areas of our life experience that can become problematic. And it imagines freeing us from those problems. It imagines the freedom of being without obligation, without slavery, without disparity. When we sing that song this morning, Imagine, ask yourself, imagine, what can I create this week that's different? What can I create that manifests a new facet of freedom within my thoughts, within my actions, within my art. I'm anxious to see what each of us is going to create with the freedom that we have within us. Let's go for it. Imagine